Hi, my name is Dorothy Kaplan. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, January 24th, 1926. I am a second-generation Omahan. My father, Jake Kaplan, was born in Omaha in and I have to stop and think what year it was. I think it was 1891. His parents homesteaded actually in the Dakota Territory and came down to, his three older sisters were born in Devil's Lake. And then the weather there was so severe and farming was not an option. It was too difficult for them. They had no knowledge of how to make a living that way. So they came down to Omaha, where my father was born on Capitol Avenue. South Omaha was a vibrant community in those days. We lived in a little enclave on 25th and Q. There weren't too many Jewish families in that area. Most of the Jewish families in South Omaha were either further south or further north. I went to school. The school was called Youngman. It is no longer there. It was a full school, kindergarten through eighth grade. When I was very young, my father, who rather than declare bankruptcy, secured a job in Salina, Kansas, and stayed there for several years so that he could pay off his debts and still remain an honorable man. In those days, bankruptcy was not considered an honorable thing to do. There were quite a few Jewish people in Salina, Kansas in those days. And I have memories of living there and of the friends I had and of the games we played. And we didn't have money. Of course, we were very, very poor. But children, when they don't have a lot of material things, become very innovative. It's strange, but I remember these paper dolls I had. And we would take corn silks and make clothes for our paper dolls. And one of my friends' father was a mortician. And she got this beautiful, gorgeous purple cloth, satin probably, that was the lining of the coffins. And we used that to make the most elegant clothes for our paper dolls. Then, of course, when my father's financial situation improved and we came back to Omaha, and I entered kindergarten at Youngman School. And in those days, school was quite different from what it is today. There was a lot of religion in our schools, and one of my unhappy memories is going into the cloakroom when morning prayers were said. And Christmas carols and the Christmas programs, and I always felt somewhat of an outsider. And I very vividly recall when I was either in kindergarten or first grade, on Monday morning, the teacher would ask us if we had been to Sunday school. And of course, in South Omaha in those days, we had a little synagogue, but there wasn't really a Sunday school for us to attend to. It was hit or miss. Well, she would pass out these beautiful, beautiful cards. I had no idea what they were. They were just so elegant and so colorful, and I really wanted one. So when she asked, "Have you gone to Sunday school?" I fibbed. I said, "Yes, I had," and I put up my hand, and she gave me this card, and I looked at it, and I had no idea what it was. It was a picture of the bleeding heart, which of course is a Catholic symbol of some sort. And I think I was absolutely appalled because here I wanted this so much and I coveted it. And once I got it, I realized it wasn't what I really wanted. But in those days, the streets were very, very safe. We lived in a very old house. My father had a scrap metal yard, which was behind our house. And the Lipsmans lived cat-a-corner from us. And on the corner, there was Len's Bar. And the neighborhood was primarily, I would say, Mexican and some whites. It was a mixed neighborhood, but it was really very safe. We played out on the streets. Nobody locked their doors. In the summertime, you slept out on your porch. We played very simple games. We had roller skates and jacks and I think scooters. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, safe time for us. And I was blessed because I had my mother, my father, my sister, my 2 older brothers, and my grandfather, who was a formidable man, even though he was short in stature. He had a shock of white hair and a gorgeous blue eye because his other eye had been, he was a trainer. He broke horses and mules to the saddle. And his eye had been kicked out by either a horse or a mule, I don't recall which. And so we really had an intact family. And although my father and mother did not involve themselves greatly in our education, they were both very busy making a living. And my mother had to take care of her father-in-law. But all of us managed very well. My brother Earl went on to university. He was the one, the rapscallion. We never knew where he was, and the family was always involved in, where is Earl? Where has Earl gone? He was always off on adventures. And we all feared that he would never amount to anything because he was so irresponsible. But he turned out to be a remarkably wonderful man and worked for many years for American Cyanamid as a research chemist. My other brother, Stanley, who is 22 months older than I, when both of my brothers went into the Army. My older brother Earl was wounded in Italy and spent 9 months recuperating. Stanley was also in the service. And when he was discharged, came back and married a lovely Omaha girl, Ann Zager. And my sister Lucille worked for, I think he was a legislator in Lincoln. Claver was his name. And so really and truly, things were good. My sister, I think, went to, what was it called, Central or something in South Omaha, the high school there. Most of my brothers, I think, went to South, but I chose to go to Central. And in those days, you could take a streetcar, you could take a bus for a nominal amount of money and go anywhere you wanted to go. And so I went to Central. And that's where all the Jewish kids were in South High. We had very, very few, so that was where I chose to go. And I graduated Central, then went on to the University of Omaha, which had just a small campus on 60th and Dodge. I would take the streetcar and transfer on 24th Street and take the bus down to the campus. And we had the one building which now houses the library and some Quonset huts. And it was a wonderful experience. My family couldn't afford to send me, so if I wanted to go to university, I had to get a scholarship. And fortunately, I was able to get a 4-year scholarship, which included the price of books. And I think tuition in those days was probably maybe $6 a credit hour. And that was how I got my degree. You talk about the Jewish community in Omaha. We had our little synagogue, which was on, I think, 24th and NL, somewhere through there. The services, for the most part, were in Yiddish, and there was a lot of noise and a lot of confusion, and the kids ran around, and then some held his hand on the bima and yelled to the top of his lungs, "Soll sein Shah!" And of course we would be quiet for a little while, but that didn't last for too long. Children were children. We were rambunctious. We didn't know what was going on. But there was a warmth there. There was a feeling of community. We had Schläfer's Butcher Shop, and we had a mikveh, I remember that. And I can remember vividly my grandfather going to synagogue with his wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tallis, which we still have in our house, in our family. In fact, I spoke to my brother Stanley about it last night, and we were wondering what we were going to do with Zadie's talus. It's, it has so many wonderful memories for me. My grandfather, actually, I remember this very vividly too. I would sit with him when the Sunday Forward came, and he would tell me what the pictures, the rotogravure section, what the pictures were. Of course, it was in Yiddish. And I could understand enough because I could see the pictures, and I don't think I understood Yiddish to that degree, but I did understand by looking at the pictures what he was trying to tell me. I was really blessed. We were not a religious family particularly. My mother kept a kosher home. We lit the Shabbos candles. We celebrated the holidays. My father's family, his sister Celia lived in Hastings. His older sister Stell lived in North Platte. And when the holidays came, they would all descend upon us, and it was wonderful. We had such a family affair where we celebrated, and there was such a sense of unity and of belonging. And we would go to North Platte on occasion and Hastings on occasion. My mother's family came from Russia. She was not born here in this country. She came as a 16-year-old with her brother, Izzy. Her maiden name was Hill. It had been Gilgoff, but when they came to this country, it was shortened to Hill. And her brothers and her sisters all settled in Lincoln, Nebraska. And periodically, we would make the trek to Lincoln. In those days, 60 miles was a long, long trip. You planned for it a week at least in advance. And of course, we had to set out to see all of the relatives, and there were many, many relatives. I was blessed to have all of this extended family. I don't know whether people have that much today. But when I would come home from school, I can remember I would come in the house, and the house would smell of these wonderful, wonderful aromas of my mother's baking. She would make cinnamon rolls, and the food, the chicken soup and the matzo balls and the roast chicken and everything else that went into it, it gave you a sense of belonging, and that's one thing that I will always treasure.
Dorothy, I'd like to go back and hear some details about your mother and your father, the kind of persons they were and what they did.
Certainly, I'm trying to think. I want to speak about B'nai Avram, the cemetery too, because that's such an important part of our history in South Omaha. My father was born in Omaha in 1891 on Capitol Avenue. He went to school. I think he never finished school. I think he went through the 8th grade. He was a real Yankee. He rode a bicycle. He was a bon vivant. And my mother came to this country as a 16-year-old, not knowing the language, a very naive, sweet young girl who had lost her own parents at a very, very young age in Russia, and had been raised by her older sister, my Aunt Siri. I don't know how they met. I would assume it was a setup, a blind date. And of course, my mother was a beautiful young woman with a tiny waist and a peaches and cream complexion. And he was smitten with her. And they were married on a Thursday because the Torah came out on a Thursday. So August 1st, 1912, they were married. And of course, he wanted her to become American immediately, throw off the ways of the old country, wear lipstick and powder. And this is what she did. But prior to her marriage, she had to learn the language. And there were kind people in Omaha. She speaks of the Gradinsky girls who taught her English and a little bit of math. And I will tell you, I admire my mother tremendously when I think of her as a 16-year-old coming over with her brother, not understanding one word of English, not knowing the mores, the customs of this country, coming here, getting a job. I think she worked in a factory at a sewing machine, and making a life for herself and adjusting and being productive. And I always found her never wound up in the old country, but always willing to learn something new, eager to learn something new. And I remember when she was voting in the election where we were voting for the first time for a woman, and how proud she was, and how she said to me, I never thought I would live to see the day when I could cast a vote for a woman. And she took such pride in that. You know, just coming here and doing what she did, this was such a spirit of survival and such a spirit of being a pioneer. I think that she was a tremendous role model. My father was a little more aloof. I did not have a relationship with him, a warm relationship. Anything I wanted, I had to go through my mother, and of course she was the intermediary. But this was not uncommon in those days. Many fathers did not involve themselves in raising their children. He worked very hard. We never went out to eat. My goodness gracious me, that was something one didn't do. We did not go to the movies, or we did not do things as a family, for the most part. The one thing I do remember my father loved to do, there were actually two things. One of them was helping my mother make donuts from scratch. And that was a wonderful experience, because I got to dip all the donut holes in either powdered sugar or cinnamon and sugar. My father loved to do and be involved in that. And the other thing is, he always helped with the canning, whether it was pickles that we were making, or I can remember pears, I can remember peaches, I can remember apricots. And that was one thing he was always involved in. He seemed to enjoy it tremendously. But we lived in South Omaha. When I was 16, my mother and father then moved to I Street. Yes, we moved, younger than that, we moved to I Street, and then we moved on to Shirley Street, where they lived until my father died. I also remember very vividly the cemetery in South Omaha, and many of my family are buried there. My grandmother, after whom I was named Doberiva, was buried there in 1925. My grandfather is buried there. My Uncle Louis Cully and Aunt Celia Cully are buried there. My husband is buried there, and I have a place next to him. Those lots were given to me by my father, and whenever I go there and I walk around and I look at the names, and I remember so vividly these people who made up our South Omaha Jewish community. And they're all gone now, but the cemetery is a wonderful reservoir of memories. And the history of South Omaha is written so poignantly there. And I hope people don't forget that South Omaha was indeed a vital part of our Omaha Jewish community.
Dorothy, where did your mother come from? Do you remember the town?
She came from a very small village in Russia. I think it's probably in the Ukraine now. She speaks about her father. She spoke about her father more than her mother. She often told me that he would take her mushroom hunting as a very young girl, and that they would go very early in the morning. And if he didn't awaken her, she would cry, because she really looked forward to that little outing with her father. I think her mother dyed clothes, because she spoke of a big vat with dye in it, so apparently people would bring material there and her mother would dye them. Her father, I believe, had a saloon or a bar for the locals, but they both died very, very young.
How did they happen to come to this country?
You know, her brothers were here. Now, why they came to Omaha, to Lincoln, I have no idea. But her brothers were here, and one by one they brought everyone over.
Tell me about her brothers.
Well, her brothers were very prominent in Lincoln society. There was Ezo Hill, Dan Hill, Nathan Hill. They had Northwestern Iron and Metal, which is to this day a very vital company, very large, very successful. One of her nephews was a federal court judge. They were all of us were all into higher education. Of course, that was the way you made it. We were people of the book, and therefore you went to school, you learned, and if you had the money and the resources, you went on and you went to college and you went to graduate school. And you assimilated. Unfortunately, that was something we also did, because the prevalent philosophy was, if you were Jewish, soll sein still, don't make waves. Now, I think we've learned. I think we've come to the point where we're comfortable enough with our Jewish identity that we can speak out and we can make waves. We had to learn to do that because we were not taught to do that. We were taught, if anything, to somewhat hide our Jewish identity so we would meld into the community more easily.
Tell me about growing up when your father had the junk in the backyard.
It was not an easy existence, I will tell you. We had all sorts of strange people that came because, my father was out in the back and doing business, but they had to, if they sold something, my father, they had to come to the house to get paid. So my mother was involved in all of that. They would come to the house, knock on the door, and have a little slip with how much money they were to get. And it was a family business, I guess, more than anything else.
Were your brothers involved in the actual running of the business?
Stanley actually did a lot of work and took over the business, as did my husband. Both of them took over the business, and it was thriving until the Kennedy Freeway was built, and the power of eminent domain took the land away. But it gave us a comfortable living for many, many, many years.
I'd like to hear you tell me about both of your brothers, their families, and so on.
Well, Earl married an Omaha girl, Sylvia Weiner. He worked for DuPont originally after he got his degree. Then, of course, the war came, and he was drafted. And he became a medic. And after a very brief time in the Army, he was sent to Italy as a litter bearer. And in Italy, they were under fire, under attack. He was carrying a wounded soldier to safety, and they were fired upon. The young man that was with him, that was his teammate, was killed. Earl was wounded quite severely, spent 9 months recuperating. But he did go back to his profession and has lived for many, many years in New Jersey, in Metuchen, and worked all those years for American Cyanamid. He has made quite a name for himself. He has many patents in his name and in the company's name, of course. He's well known as a stamp collector. He is a charming, wonderful man. I am blessed to have two brothers that I adore. My other brother, who is 22 months older, Stanley, came back from the service, married also an Omaha girl, Ann Zager, and they have 3 sons. And he went into my father's business, as did my husband. His 3 sons are all back east, and Stanley is back east. He is now a widower. Michael works for a company that is headquartered in Israel, has his doctorate. He's married to a young woman who has a doctorate. They have one daughter, Jessica, who is now pregnant and who is married a young man who is in medical school, and she is in medical school. David, the second son, has 2 children. He works in New York. He's in computers. Chuck, the younger boy, is married to a doctor. He is a hospital administrator, and he has 2 charming young daughters who are the apple of his eye. I am in touch with all of them weekly. I am blessed to have a wonderful family. My sister died some years back, so we lost her. And my husband died 13 years ago after many years of being not well. But in those 13 years, I have continued to work at the library. In fact, I've been at the library, at the Jewish Federation Library, the Kripke Library now. I've been there, I'm starting my 26th year. I worked for 20 years full-time. And then after Marvin died, I cut down to part-time. And now I work 8 hours on Monday and 7 hours on Tuesday. And I am so blessed to have a job that I love and enjoy. And I've watched the library grow and change, and I've watched the center grow and change, and the community grow and change. And I will tell you, the one thing that I am most proud of in my entire life, I think, is the fact that I was born into a Jewish family, into this wonderful heritage which I cherish tremendously. My great hope is that it will always endure, and I really and truly believe it will, because it's endured for 5,000 years. There's no reason for it to disappear now.
Let's go back and talk about the family that lived outstate Nebraska, visiting there, and their families.
Well, sure. I can remember most of all going to see Aunt Celia. We called her Aunt Skinny. She was just a wonderful, wonderful woman. She loved to shop. In fact, she could wear anybody out. But we would go to Hastings, and I can remember sitting on the stoop of her house, and she had a son, Bob, who is now retired from the University of California system, and I think he's Dean Emeritus. And Bob and I had such wonderful times together. She had 4 sons. Bob is still alive and in California. The other 3 sons are now gone. Stanley had a clothing store in Grand Island, Greenberger Clothing. I'm still very close with his daughter, Sandra, and she lives in Baltimore now. And Sandra Freed comes to visit me all the time, and we talk on the phone almost weekly. You know, it's just wonderful to think that I still call her my cousin, but actually I guess she's my first cousin once removed. But as far as I'm concerned, it's all family, and I don't make any distinctions. And I'm blessed in that area too, because she now has a granddaughter, so now I have another cousin, another generation to claim. I'm trying to remember now. Maynard was married and had, I believe, 3 daughters. I'm not in touch with them as much as I would like to be. Yale had a son and a daughter. I still speak with Arlene, his daughter. In fact, I spoke with her last week. His son Lou has taken the family business, which was started as an iron and metal company, and is now a tremendously successful new and used pipes. It's a very large company and has done exceedingly well. And I do talk to him. He married an Omaha girl, a Meyerson, and he has 2 children. My Aunt Celia's family, the only one left is my cousin, not Aunt Celia, Aunt Stell, excuse me, has only 1 son living. Delmer, her older son, was a musician and played with some of the big bands of the era. He was very, very successful, but it required night work and traveling, and it was hard to have a family, so he did give it up. But he was a tuba player and a bass player. And Delmer used to come occasionally. He lived in Texas, and he would come occasionally with his wife Ruthie and visit with Marvin and me, and we would have wonderful times together. He was noted for making the most wonderful bread in the city where he lived. And he was a wonderful raconteur. Delmer was a delight to have around. His brother Avram is still alive, lives in Shawnee, Kansas, married to an Omaha girl, Lillian Lusgard. And they have 3 children. And we have always gone to Kansas City in that area whenever there's been a bat mitzvah, and they have come here. We have remained very, very close.
Now I'd like to hear you tell me about meeting your husband.
You know, I met him on a blind date. I actually went to visit my brother in New Jersey and met a friend of theirs who happened to have the same last name that I had. And he was in the Army at that time, and we met, and we had a lot in common, and we were married. I have to stop and think. I graduated university in '47. By the way, let me tell you, I graduated summa cum laude from the university. I was the first person to have that honor. We were married in 1948 at the Fountaindale Hotel, which is no longer in Omaha. It has been raised, but it was a beautiful, gorgeous hotel. And one of the places in Omaha where the girls would meet for lunch, we would either go to the Paxton or the Blackstone or the Fountaindale or meet under the clock at Brandeis, and we would have, of course, we got all dressed up. You wore hose, you wore gloves, you wore a hat. It was a big deal to go downtown, and we enjoyed it. You know, it was a big deal, for example, to go to the Orpheum. We would go early because we had to stay all day long. We had to see the stage show at least 2 or 3 times. Goodness gracious me, we had to get our money's worth. But in South Omaha, we had 2 theaters. We had the Circle, we had the Tivoli. And every Saturday, I went down with, I think, probably 10 or 15 cents. And that was the movie admission, that was popcorn, and that was a Holloway sucker of some sort that would last all through the performance. And of course, it was 2 movies. It was the news. It was a cartoon. You really got your money's worth. And for a nickel, you got a bag of popcorn that could last you for several hours. Things have changed dramatically. But those were wonderful memories.
Tell me about your wedding.
My wedding was really a very elaborate affair. We had friends in San Francisco, and he was a florist. And as a wedding gift, he did all of the flowers for our wedding, and they all came in from California, and they were absolutely magnificent. I was very, very fortunate to have friends like that. I had bridesmaids, a white dress, everything one could want.
Who were the
sit-down
bridesmaids?
dinner. You know, I'm trying to remember. You talked about that, and I'm trying to remember who it was. My sister-in-law, Anne. Maybe my sister-in-law, Sylvia. I don't remember. Isn't that funny? I'd have to go look at my wedding pictures. I have to go find them and look and see. That was a long time ago. I still have my wedding dress, however. And Marvin was resplendent. Of course, we didn't rent tuxes in those days to that degree. I think he probably wore a dark suit, but that was certainly appropriate.
Were you married by a rabbi?
Of course, we were married by a rabbi.
And who was he?
I think it was Rabbi Moskowitz. Everyone, you had little premarital session with him that lasted about a half hour, and you were embarrassed to tears talking about things that one didn't talk about in those days. But it was a Jewish wedding. We did not have elaborate ketubas in those days. It was just a little piece of paper that specified you were married. And later on, ketubas became very fashionable. And I think it's wonderful. It's a way of remembering a very important time in your life.
Tell me about your married life with Marvin.
Well, you know, until very late in our married life, I never worked. I was a stay-at-home mother. When we were first married, I did have a job. We were in Omaha originally, and I worked at the university under two professors, Mr. Crane and Mr. Utley, as I recall. And I graded papers and did all sorts of things for them. Then we spent a short time in California. But I think I missed Omaha. We came back, and Marvin went into business with Stanley and my father, and we remained in Omaha all that time. And Marvin became so much of a Midwesterner that he forgot what it was like to be an Easterner and be from New Jersey, because he assimilated and enjoyed the Midwestern atmosphere enormously. There is a different pace to living in this part of the country than there is to living on either coast, and I think there's a lot to be said for it. It was a wonderful place to bring up our two children. Howard, who is an attorney, and who is married to an attorney, and they have one son, Martin Jacob, and my other son, Robert, who has been a special needs person, but has done, I think, very well with his life, lives independently, and for that I'm very grateful.
Tell me about your grandson.
Marty, he's adopted. He came to our house to their house when he was 21 hours old. That was the last time my mother left the Blumkin home. She came to their home to see Marty and to hold him and to fondle him and to take joy in having a great grandson. And he has been a joy to have. Now, of course, he's 16. He's independent. He's in the jazz band. He's in the marching band. He has his own car, but he is still very much involved in Bethel. In fact, our whole family has been involved with Bethel Synagogue for 50 years. I was married at Bethel. My brother Stanley was married Bethel. Howard reads Torah at Bethel and takes great pleasure in it. It's been a wonderful association. 80 years old, January 24th, and I look back on it, and I can't believe I've spent 80 years on this earth, but I have been truly, truly blessed. I have a wonderful, wonderful family. 2 beautiful sons who I adore, a grandson who has been a joy, 2 brothers who have been so supportive and so thoughtful, and with whom I have had a wonderful relationship. But not only that, I have had friends in this community who have given me so much. And if I can give anything back to the community in any way, and I feel that I do somewhat through my position at the Kripke Library, I have been blessed. Not only to have family and friends, but to have a job, and most importantly, to have been born into this wonderful, wonderful heritage of being a Jew. I really think I've had it all. I also remember very vividly the cemetery in South Omaha, and many of my family are buried there. My grandmother, after whom I was named Doberiva, was buried there in 1925. My grandfather is buried there. My Uncle Louis Cully and Aunt Celia Cully are buried there.